Hello, sisters, and welcome to Go Solo Live. This is Jennifer Buchholz with Transform Via Travel. It's time to sit back, grab a cup of coffee, and enjoy my conversation with BB Peters from Boom Goddess Radio as she shares her solo travel adventures, starting at the early age of 7.
Welcome to Go Solo Live.
Don't you mean Go Solo Live? Have you ever been asked, why on earth would you travel alone? Go Solo Live not only answers that question, but celebrates life as a midlife solo traveler. This is a safe place for women to come together to reminisce about their travels, encourage others to travel, and to dig into the real lessons learned from these journeys. Now join Jennifer Buchholz with Transform Via Travel as she and her guests share stories of the solo travelers of midlife women.
Joining me today is BB Peters with Boom Goddess Radio. Welcome, BB.
Hello, Jennifer. It's such a pleasure to be here with you.
I'm so excited that you get to start to share your story of solo travel. And I think we have such rich stories to share, but yours goes back a ways. So we love to just dig right into the content. And I'd love for you to tell me, where did you get started with your solo travel?
Well, it seems that, it began like many years ago at the very tender age of probably 7 or 8. I remember walking, at that time, I lived in a little town in Poland called Białystok, which is kind of by Warsaw. And so I walked 2 blocks to catch a bus that took me downtown Białystok, and this was all by myself. I think I was going to catechism classes. And of course, I had to beg my parents to allow me to do that. And during those times, things were a little different as far as security and personal care and kids, traveling on their own. But the excitement of getting on that bus, of going to downtown and going to catechism class, I have to say I always went. I didn't skip, but I did. But I did get to see all the vendors and at the market, at the fair. It was the most exhilarating experience. And I could not wait to do that every week.
That sounds amazing. Now, it's funny because I think many of us at a young age have had some experiences of some of that solo exploration that I don't know our kids right now have that same opportunity.
Yes, and that makes me sad because how can you develop that courage and how can you develop that curiosity if you're not given the opportunity to explore, right?
Absolutely. And, the thing is that we talk about how the world is not safe for them to do that. And that's one of the main reasons why we've honestly started this podcast is because so many times, even as a midlife woman, when I'd say I was traveling solo, the first concern is, are you crazy? Is it safe? And so that whole safety concern is pervasive almost to no matter what age you are.
Yes, that's so true. And I think that, we develop that shell of security and comfort and courage. That's what I wanted to say. We develop our shell of courage when we're given the opportunity to do that. My opportunities continued for many years because at the age of 11, my parents and I immigrated from Poland to the U.S. And so as an only child, I was given the responsibility of really taking care of my parents from a language perspective. And so I had to do a lot of little solo travels, but that continued. And I remember in college, still on Long Island, I took the train from Smithtown, Long Island to New York City to apply for a job with an airline. It was my dream to be an airline hostess or attendant. And so I took the train, and that was another memorable amount of experience and adventure of facing the unknown and feeling, do you find also that when you do it, you have this sense of pride and accomplishment?
That is so it's like it grows exponentially. Every time you try something that you're a little bit out of your comfort zone, it that pride and accomplishment swells and your confidence swells, and then your comfort zone expands.
Yes, yes, yes. And then you're thirsting for it, right? You've loved that experience. You've learned new things. So now you want to add more of those experiences into your life.
It becomes addicting.
It becomes addictive, right? And and I'm not sure if it's by a matter of circumstances or some universal plan for my life. But then when I was a banker and worked in Florida and managed 17 branches on both coasts, I had to do a ton of travel back and forth, a ton solo. Mostly, because we were conscious of being efficient and saving money for the company. So I traveled by myself, and that was exciting and fun, and that was different.
Well, and what's interesting is I think that there's actually a lot of women out there traveling solo for work, but because it's for work, they don't necessarily count it as solo travel. Yet, there's still for some people getting on the plane alone for the first time, or being in a city alone and deciding, am I going to stay in my hotel or am I going to go out and explore? So there's a real validity to the solo travel that people are experiencing when they're doing it for work. And it's just ironic to me that people don't necessarily categorize it that way, or there are some that think if you're traveling for work, even if you're alone, then it automatically must be safe. So the irony comes from all sorts of viewpoints related to solo travel for work. So where were you traveling a lot when it came to your work?
So I was traveling in Florida between the two coasts, between the East and West coasts, and visiting all 17 of our branches. But that also continued in my later years when I was the chief financial officer for a global architectural firm based out of Seattle. So you can see my pattern of traveling the world now, right? From Poland to Long Island to Florida to Seattle, and now in Tucson. But in Seattle, I was the CFO for a global architectural firm, and we grew the company from 15 people when I started to 375 and 6 offices, and one in Shanghai that I started. So here we go. There was an opportunity to travel solo on the way back on the return trip. And you were talking before about, that fear of even getting on the plane, or even eating alone, or knowing if you want to leave the hotel or not. All of those are so much part of our environment and our presence, but somehow you, the master world traveler, and me less so, we tend to overcome those and get bigger and stronger and more courageous at the end.
And that's the goal, really. And I actually strongly believe that you don't have to be this huge world traveler to reap the benefits of solo travel, that, short excursions close to home, but still things that are filling you with adventure and wonder, whatever that may be. That's all part of the actual joy of solo travel.
I so agree. And I want to share a little sweet story about traveling to Albuquerque. Now I live in Tucson, and my dear friend Pamela, who's a tango aficionado, wanted to go to a tango festival in Albuquerque. So she borrowed her husband's high quality SUV, and we went there. And while she was involved in tango, I just watched for a little while, but I had a strong desire to get on the train and take it to Santa Fe. It was like a calling to me. Okay.
Isn't there a song about that?
I'm sure. And so I didn't want to borrow her husband's high quality SUV to get to the train, depot, because men are a little particular about their cars. So I decided for the very first time to take Uber. And because that's been on my mind for a long time, this just happened a year and a half ago. And so I said, I am so doing this. Well, I downloaded the app. I called the Uber person. He came and took me there, and I was a little nervous because, will the technology work? Will I be comfortable at the train depot? And I got on the train and had the most marvelous, delightful adventure. Ever. People were delightful. I could walk around the beautiful art streets in Santa Fe, and I just love the experience. So it was a magical day, and it was right here, just between Tucson and Albuquerque.
I'm so proud of you on so many levels, and I'm so glad that you decided to share that story with my audience. So technology is amazing with what we have right now, but can also be really overwhelming for some people. So you sharing your experience about the downloading the Uber app and I'm just going to do it. That's what it takes. But it takes being ready. And I have had some friends, even younger, who have been very nervous about the whole concept of Uber. And of course, sometimes there are headlines that don't make them so friendly to solo travelers. And we're not hearing those as much anymore, which is a good thing. But, that first step was they said, I really just would like to do Uber with someone for the first time. And then I'll do it on my own. Then they understand the system, they have the confidence, and they're able to do it. And in some ways, I honestly think like organizations or Uber themselves should provide that, like, we'll do it with you the first time. We'll make it a little bit easier and reduce that stress barrier. Because once you do it, you're like, hey, this is no problem. I got this.
Fantastic idea. That's a fantastic idea. That they should put something into their either videos or perhaps physically, speaking, just a little guide of some sort, right? That helps men and women, but particularly women who are venturing out on their own, gives them a little more comfort. Because when I returned from my little trip to Santa Fe and took Uber back to Albuquerque, or I returned on the train and called for another Uber to take me back to hotel, the car didn't come. I believe what happened was that someone else called them or pulled them over, and they took that party. Now it's getting a little dark. There are no other humans in the train station at all. And I am feeling a little bit of tension and a little bit of blood, on my skin. A little nervous about it. But so I said, well, okay, how about if I just call another car? And I said, never mind the cost. It's totally irrelevant, but I can always try and explain to them that, hey, I called and they didn't come. And lo and behold, like in 3 minutes, another car comes and it's perfectly fine. So, we have those moments of uncertainty.
Well, and one of the things that I've done for some people that I've worked with is we just do like a challenge weekend. And in that weekend, I've taken them to Chicago and we practice riding public transportation and we practice like reading some of those, not just the map, but all the other bits and pieces of information related to travel. Because it cracks me up when the first trip somebody decides to do when they're going solo is over to Paris, where they're going to have to take public transportation or pay a lot of money. And it's in a foreign language and they've never done public transportation in the US. And it just is so mind-boggling to me that they take that leap. And I'm more of a baby step person. Let's give you the baby steps. You build your confidence. And then, hey, if you want to take a calculated risk, go for it. But goodness knows.
I love that idea of having some type of a gathering a group to explore how they have traveled, with whom, and what gave them comfort, what gave them fears, and taking them step by step. I think that's a fantastic idea.
Well, and it just, again, those are all those confidence builders, because if we had to sit down and come up with all the things that are getting in our way of just saying yes to something, we can come up with barriers all over the place. And as soon as you start with just one of taking it down, all of a sudden it seems like the others fall like dominoes, which is amazing.
Right. Right. And as you were saying, I was thinking, and what about the immense benefits that we get, right? So I was thinking there is the freedom that you have, there is the independence, all the decisions that you're making in that moment in time are yours to be made.
Absolutely.
You have more time to think, right, and be aware of the present, of the entire experience. And you have time to deeply look at nature, at the colors, at the monuments, at the people, and you are 100% responsible for the actions that you take. I think that is immensely powerful to us women, especially.
Absolutely. I love it. That makes a huge difference. And so you've taken us through a recent trip. I actually, tell me what the train ride was like.
Oh my gosh, it was so adorable, just so fantastic. First of all, I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, $8 round trip. The most magical train, beautifully appointed, gorgeous, clean, spotlessly clean, wonderful in size, and getting on the train and then meeting these lovely women. There was a couple and a woman, and we sat across from each other, so you instantly connect by asking questions about where you're going and where you're from and all of that. And the train was superbly delightful, smooth as anything, and you're traveling across beautiful terrain in New Mexico, and you arrive in about an hour or so, so it's not an overly long, period of time, and then you're there.
That sounds fantastic. Makes me wonder why we don't do just those. We are often the poorest travelers in our own backyard.
Yes, that is so, so true. A friend of mine, Jennifer, she used to work for Amtrak, and now she has access to traveling on Amtrak all over the world. She lives here in Tucson as well. And she is a big advocate of women, whether it be solo or in company of others, traveling by train. So there's a train that comes out of LA, stops here in Tucson, and then it goes through Texas, which takes 24 hours to get through that huge state. And then you end up in New Orleans. So you go from LA to New Orleans, or from Tucson to New Orleans, in the comfort of a train, and you have a sleeping quarter that you're comfortable in. And it's another way of doing that.
That's exactly right. And that's the other part too, is there's something to be said for slow travel.
And what do you mean by that?
Well, so a lot of times we are in a very big hurry to get to where we're going. So for example, when we're headed to New Orleans, it's what's the shortest flight, and when you do train or find other ways to travel, you actually are able to enjoy a bit of the journey as well as the destination. And that can make a huge difference as well.
Right, absolutely. Because you're giving yourself the permission to relax, to take a seat back, to breathe, to incorporate the changes around you, to meet new people, to amp up your quantity of experiences. And don't you feel broader, like more expanded after that?
Absolutely. And I'm not always a fan of being the person chit-chatting on the airplane, but at least getting to say hello to your neighbor. You never know who might be sitting next to you. And I will tell you, one of the most moving times for me sitting next to someone on the plane and striking up that conversation was with a very young widow. And it was right when I had started this business, and my heart is very full of working with people with going through grief. And as she shared her story, she was going to Mexico to actually celebrate her husband's life with his sister. And so there was a lot of emotion she had. And the fact that we actually had some really good conversation on the flight, I learned all about her story and the story of her husband, who was incredible. And I was so much fuller from initiating that conversation. We are so used to being detached and involved in our devices and things that we are shutting out a lot of those experiences around us. And those involve people as well as places.
Right. And I think about not having the opportunity, not having the gift of experiencing the world if you're solo, if you are single, or if you choose to travel solo, in having that and being, stuck in your position of saying, I wish I saw more of the world, but I'm by myself and I'm scared and I don't want to go by myself. So therefore, that must not be meant for me. Well, that's not my attitude. Okay. That's not my
I love it.
My thing is the world is there to be experienced, and you have the choice of taking action to ease your fears, whether it be easing your fears about technology, as you were saying before, or about meeting new people. But if you want to experience that fullness in yourself, in your life, in your heart, and in your spirit, then you need to give yourself the guide, the direction, the push to make that happen, I think.
Absolutely. I love it. That sounds amazing. So we've talked about a wide range of your travels. Has there ever been a time where you have been traveling that you were a little bit less certain, maybe just frustrated with the travel or fearful from a safety perspective?
Never really per se from a safety perspective, but concerned about some of the airports. When you arrive in, let's say, Chicago, the thing is freaking huge, right? And there are endless places to go and catch your connections and everything. And there's always this like heart palpitation about, okay, where do I need to be? How many trains or buses connecting do I need to take to get there? And what time is it? Will I make it? That sort of a, trepidation has been of some concern to me, but it works out, but you can't help but have that.
Agreed. That momentary anxiety is actually very good for us. I think it creates a different level of awareness.
Right.
And I think we should all just, instead of being like, I hope I don't get anxious, just accept part of this process is probably that I'm going to get anxious.
Right.
So I'm just going to be better at dealing with it and knowing yourself well enough and giving yourself a chance to figure out what makes you anxious and then what can you do to recover from it.
Right. And, there are other things that people can do. They can take, there's a product called Calm, and I don't know if you've heard of it. And if they're just feeling that anxiety, just take a little bit of it. It's really a natural product. It's good for your system. Read something that is enlightening and encouraging and inspirational. Do some breathing so that you're not feeling that what I call, that sort of pull that's inside of you, that angst that, like you said.
Exactly. So I actually get a lot of motion sickness. I hate it, but I get it. And so what I've learned from myself is I have to travel on a full stomach. I need to drink, X amount of water before I go. Here, I sit by a window on an airplane. Like there are these things that I do, that. And some people say that that's more habit and routine that gives you comfort. That could be. But taking the time to experiment what works and what doesn't, and then sticking to that routine can be helpful so that you, again, the routine then can eliminate some of that anxiety.
Yes.
So When you think about travel and you hear people saying, well, I'm not sure that I could go solo. I'm not sure I could do it alone. What do you say to them?
Well, what immediately comes to my mind is this example of a woman that I think you'd love to have on your show as well. Her name is Leisha Berry. She is just amazing woman. She traveled to France during the terrorist attacks. She didn't time it accordingly with that, of course, but she set a plan to travel to France, and I guess this happened a year ago. That's where they had 2 or 3 of them, right?
Yep.
And she was right there, and that.
Wow.
To me is the biggest. We were doing a podcast on dining alone, right?
Great.
Just fear of that, right?
Yep.
But Leisha's experience was 100-fold of being alone in France during a terrorist attack.
Yep.
That brings another level or definition of fear to play. But the courage, what inspires me so much is that the women, and I speak of the women because that's who we talk to most of the time, have the incredible amount of courage, and they're so inspirational to weather the hardest of times and then still enjoy it and say that that was a trip of a lifetime.
Well, that's the interesting part. So one of the things that I think is so important for travel is that perspective.
Yes.
And
yes. The mindset, right?
Yes. And the other part is don't look at your travel experience in just that moment of something going wrong. But instead, when something goes wrong, accept that, yep, that happened. This is not as I had planned. Things are not going how I had expected. But accepting that and then in a way almost embracing it is what allows you to then say, okay, so now I've got to change and I'm open to something different. And nope, it's not what I expected, but it's still good.
It's still good. It's still a matter of growth. It's still a matter of learning, right? And that's what we advocate beyond anything else, is just to be receptive to learning, to experiencing, to experimenting, because that is the key, the most vital resource for longevity and well-being.
Well, and one of the things that you learn when you're traveling is that your version of self-reliance. And so if you don't have these unexpected things come up that give you the opportunity to practice that, you're actually missing out on some of the value of that trip.
And don't you think that if you travel alone some, and then let's say you get divorced or your spouse dies, right? The life has already prepared you in small increments for occupying that new space that you may find yourself in.
Thank you so much for bringing that up. It's always a tricky topic to bring up. And I am single in a long-term relationship, and I've not been married. So sometimes it's hard for people to understand and relate to my call for solo travel because they just say, well, I have a travel partner. And that's great. But there is something to be said for the joy of the relationship of each pursuing something on their own. It doesn't have to be major. And it is practice for whatever the circumstances may bring for both parties to feel like they can do that on their own. I'm actually a certified grief support specialist and have recently been working with widows and widowers. And there is, especially for those who had dreamed of traveling with their partner through retirement, when that's no longer an option, and sometimes that happens very quickly, that they realize that's not going to be an option anymore, either due to death or possibly just physical limitations. There's a lot of emotion that goes into the travel then. And we talk about, are you planning travel to honor your significant other? Are you planning to live out the dreams that you had thought that you were going to do together, because the emotion involved in that, and had there been a bit more practice of solo travel, not saying those feelings wouldn't still be there, but it wouldn't be coupled with processing those feelings as well as fear.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And don't you find that um, you don't have to, at least to begin with, say, I am doing a 3-country trip all by myself. Okay. That's not where you begin, right?
Right.
You can say, okay, I'm going to take a flight from New York City to London, where I'll meet up with 4 other women or a little travel group, and then we'll go and visit the 3 places, right?
That's exactly it. You don't have to do it all on your own. Or I love group travel. And I definitely love it if it's solo women coming together for group travel in whatever respect that happens. But once you've done that, once you've been in an area and you've gained your confidence around the area, I encourage people, stay a day or two on a longer on your own and create your own experience from there. It doesn't have to be like this huge mountain you're trying to climb, and get support climbing the mountain first and then go have a little fun in the foothills.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And then come back and gather with the group and enjoy a cup of tea or a glass of wine and share the experiences. So now you have 12 or 20 sets of eyes experiencing the country and the territory, as opposed to just through one group.
That's exactly it. And so I hope that as people are listening to this, there's some inspiration around there's not just one way to travel solo. It is such a broad range of options.
Right, right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Short trip, long trip, in the country, outside of the country, a combination of some solo, some group, but give yourself the gift of traveling solo for part of your life, right?
Absolutely. So now you were originally born in Poland. And I'm curious, when, and your family immigrated to the US, I'm curious, how does your family, or how have you experienced them viewing travel in general different than what you may have experienced people who've never really lived elsewhere?
Well, I just have a little short story about my mom. One of my goals before she passed away was to take her back to Poland, just to have a little daughter and mother trip. And so we flew from New York into Holland and then into Poland, and stayed with my aunt or her sister. And I'm an only child. So you can imagine how protective my parents, particularly my mom, has been during all of my life. So I wanted to venture out solo. We were staying at my aunt's condo, and I wanted to walk to a bus that I did when I was 7, and then take the bus into downtown. My mother, granted, she wasn't feeling well physically, but she forbade me to do that because that would make her die or make her just get very ill. She said that she read stories where on the bus, if you had a handbag, they would cut off your arm to get your handbag. Now, I just don't think there was such a story, but she had that fear. So her protectiveness really squelched my ability to experience a little bit of solo travel during that time. So yeah, so even though my parents traveled from Poland to US and in different parts in the US, the protectiveness of my mom never left.
That's interesting. And your mom is always your mom. It doesn't matter.
Yes.
But that example really does illustrate how what could be one incident, or how that can be blown into such a legend that is the only truth accepted about that circumstance.
Right, exactly. And in wanting to keep peace, on our trip, and really it was a gift from me to her to have this trip, I just gave in and said, you know what, I won't do it. If you want to come when you're feeling better, the two of us will go. But so that was the little story with my sweet mom.
Well, and again, it's great that you just acquiesced. That is not an unusual thing. For people who are traveling solo together in a situation like this, or who are traveling with a travel partner and want to try to go solo, one of the things that I share is an actual travel compatibility profile
I
as a
love
way.
that.
It's this
Ooh,
huge questionnaire because you can see like the
ooh,
top 10 questions almost anywhere on the internet. This is really an in-depth questionnaire to talk to travel partners about. I When I traveled with someone not that long ago and we shared a room, she was a news junkie. So she wanted to watch the news morning as she woke up and in the evening before bed. And I'm not that. I'm actually completely the opposite. And I only choose to take in the news exactly and when and how I want to. So we were at opposite ends of the spectrum. And finally, we had to just have a conversation. I'm like, can you pick one? Can you do either morning or evening? Or, go down to the lobby and watch one of them or something, because I can't have this in my space all the time.
absolutely. And if you were traveling solo, this issue would not materialize, right? You
Exactly.
you would choose your path and she would choose her path, and that would be it. So that's just a very basic, clear advantage.
Exactly. So you were mentioning something, and I know that this is still probably new on the horizon, but did you say that you had recently taken a trip to Costa Rica?
Yes, yes, yes. So we were there about 2 years ago, and I went with my sweet friend Pamela, who's the tango aficionado. Right. And so she and I arranged to meet. And I was traveling solo going there actually, because she was going there for another tango festival
Nice.
and yoga. So she flew a week ahead of me. And then I joined. I flew from Tucson to Texas and then to Costa Rica, stayed in San Jose, the capital, overnight. And then she came in with her car the next day and we went off. So
Nice.
that was wonderful. I loved that trip with her, and the good part of it was by myself.
Well, and what I like about that too is she was going for a particular purpose. She really liked tango. And so she was going to go find some of the best places to go and experience that. And that's another way to go do solo travel. And there's a lot of people who craft. Will find some of the coolest places. Maybe there's a workshop being offered, but then when you go do the workshop. There's probably some locals there. Talk to them, stay a couple extra days, and go experience the place where you are.
Absolutely. Or a cooking class, or a
Yes.
yoga retreat, or a writer's retreat, right? Any of those opportunities that we are personally attached to.
Well, and it just makes me happy when I hear people say, I found somebody who said, I love this band, but I could go pay, X amount to go see them in my own backyard. Or the tickets were a lot cheaper in this other city. And then I just paid to go visit that city too. And so they're following a band that they love, but they're adding the travel component and experience to it. What better way to do it?
Yes, yes. In this current environment that we're in, do you recommend that single traveling women carry some protection if traveling within the US? I mean, it's hard to take things like mace or something on the plane, right?
It is. And so that's where I really am more about the awareness techniques. And actually, recently, I think folks might be able to find it on my Facebook page. We had a guest speaker come to my local meetup, and he was talking about how things that women do just out of general politeness can often be putting them at risk. And it was fantastic. I will share a little bit in the show notes about what that experience was. But that, to me, it's more about that awareness and being very aware of you, what you're carrying, how you're carrying yourself and your surroundings. Too often we get reliant on those other tools that we might be able to use. And then if they're not available, we don't necessarily have a plan B in place.
Right. Right. How you dress, right? How you carry your bag over half of your body, or if you carry a little pouch around your belly, and how you're not taking out money out of a wallet, and there's like all these 20s are coming out of it, and people are going by. And so just a little bit extra planning ahead, right? A little thought, little awareness, as you said.
And it doesn't, in some ways, like, of course, in some European cities, the pickpockets are more prevalent, but, it's really just a lot of common sense. And whether you're in the US or overseas, you're not putting yourself in situations where you're vulnerable, not making decisions that could then get you in trouble. And that actually is one of my bigger concerns for people, is that they sometimes feel impenetrable as they have gained their confidence when they are traveling, which is, I love the feeling of being impenetrable, but it's not true.
Right. A little extra caution or a little extra thought goes a long way in providing the level of comfort that you need to be doing it yourself.
Absolutely. BB, I can't believe how quickly our time has gone today. I have so much enjoyed speaking with you. I would like to make sure that my listeners know where to find you to hear more of the fun stories that you have to share. Can you tell them?
Oh, thank you. Yes, absolutely. So, I am part of a marvelous podcast group called Boom Goddess Radio, and there are two co-hosts and myself, and we can be found on our website at boomgoddessradio.com, also on our Facebook page, Boom Goddess Radio, and Instagram and Twitter as Boom Goddess, and Boom, B-O-O-M, is short for boomer, and goddess, of course, we know, is the protector, the muse of the Roman and Greek times. And when do we not need it more than now, right? In this era of the woman.
Absolutely. So that information will also be provided in the show notes so people can track you and your co-host down and hear what you have to say on Boom Goddess. BB, it has been my sincere pleasure to share this time with you today.
Thank you so much. I just like to leave you with one quote that is guiding us, and that is, the most important thing one woman can do for another is to illuminate and expand her sense of actual possibilities. And so that's what I want to do for you, and thank you for doing that for me.
That is amazing. I love it, BB. You have a great day.
You do too. Thank you.
Wasn't it great to hear the stories that BB shared with us today? I think we covered a lot of ground, from safety to taking time to explore. I hope you enjoyed it. If you love these stories and want to help support Go Solo Live, you can do that by making a small financial contribution to the show at www.patreon.com/GoSoloLive. That's www.patreon.com/GoSoloLive. There are a lot of options and great gifts of appreciation. Well, sisters, we've reached the end of today's episode, but the conversation doesn't have to end there. Be sure to follow us on Twitter at Go Solo Live, and if you're interested in being on the show, make sure that you tweet me. Until next time, remember, go solo, not alone.